Oh, hi. I want to make a video on the fact that that we can argue. The fact that we can argue, yes, and the fact that contrary interests exists. Yeah, I can kind of read it. Yeah. So, yes, the fact that we can argue and the fact that we can exist. Someone wants to say that stuff is arbitrary. The fact that we can argue and the fact that obviously you can feel pain if that's not good enough. The fact that we can argue about something and you can experience the pain of the argument, experience the persecution of the argument, and realize, oh, this argument can cause a lot of trouble. And realizing the direct intentions and the direct implications of an argument. And realizing that I can have a contrary opinion to you. The fact that these two contrary opinions exist is a fact in and of itself. You can say it's arbitrary, but it exists. Are you saying it doesn't exist? Are you saying that these aren't two contrary opinions? That there's no objection here? I think there's an objection, and I think the objection exists. And if the objection exists, at least that can be proven to be true. And if there's an objection that exists, I think we can come to the conclusion that even though I may not be completely right, there is a more right way, because there has to be some standard to which we're measuring these things that we find right and wrong. What you believe is based on what you find more right and more wrong. You can say it doesn't make any sense, but everything you do has to come from some foundation, some starter of some kind of logical sense, because that's how your arm moves from here to here. Because what happened? You can describe it happened as a different way, but it happened from here to here because it moved in the space from here to here, even though if I can't explain it. Just because I can explain here to here, I can't say exactly X, Y, Z axis, or whatever it may be based on whatever description you want to use. Yeah, exactly. Whatever description you want to use, exactly the way you want to describe the description, based on whatever means of measurement. It doesn't matter. It exists. My hand moved from here to here. It doesn't need any other description other than that. Sort of like any argument that you may have and trying to prove a point or whatever it may be, it exists regardless of what you may want to think exists or doesn't exist. There's an objective reality that is existing beyond what the contrary opinion you may have to what reality actually exists, or the fact that there's a contrary opinion that actually exists, say if you're in an argument with someone. So this is existing in a certain way regardless. So you're having a contrary opinion. Yes, and that exists as the fact. And a contrary opinion, where did your opinion start? And it started somewhere. It didn't start from nowhere. It started from somewhere. It sprouted out of the ground somewhere. And the ground that it sprouted out of existed. And the dirt and the soil and everything existed. You can argue what flour it is. You can argue what it smells like. You can argue all those silly, frivolous things, but the fact is it sprouted out as an idea from some kind of function of reality. It came from somewhere. And the fact that someone else has some kind of contrary opinion and you're arguing with them, the fact that you're arguing proves a point in and of itself. Not only the implications, but where the argument came from. You have to base off of something. And the something it's based off of has to come from somewhere, right? Yes, it has to come from somewhere. There has to be some kind of base in which it came from. And you can lie, but the lie you came up from, like I mentioned before, all these different paradoxes and conundrums and all these contradictions come from some kind of foundation. Whatever you believe, whatever you deny, you can say just magically move from left to right. It doesn't matter if you say that or if you contradict yourself. It existed in a certain way, and you're basing your lie or delusion based on the way it existed in reality regardless. And it doesn't matter if you accept it or deny it. It exists in reality a certain way. You can say your finger didn't get chopped off, even though it got chopped off, and you can say, well, yes, it didn't get chopped off, but it's chopped off, and you can deny it all you want. It's chopped off. You can say it isn't, but it is, and that's beyond your control. I'm sorry, there's nothing much you can do about the fact that it's destroyed. Your hand's destroyed, or your fingers got cut off. How exactly it got cut off, it doesn't matter. Exactly where, how many images of this. It got cut off right here. It got cut off. It exists. And my ability to describe it isn't required. It exists in and of itself. I'm sorry. It exists as a function and as a reality, regardless of my ability to describe it. And like I've redundantly mentioned in all these videos, I don't need to mention that, yes, my description exists, but it exists independent only in the same existence as the fact that I'm describing my finger, the thing that I'm describing. got cut off, and it's over there now, and there it's cut off here. How many inches? Based on whatever arbitrary standard you want to describe on how my finger got cut off, it's cut off. My finger is disconnected from my body. And that's something I can describe thoroughly enough in words enough to prove a point, but it's something that doesn't need to be described because reality explains itself. And like I mentioned before, you don't need um, um, the argument itself, a contrary opinion. The implications of that. You should understand you're arguing. You're using your mouth. Are you saying you're not using your mouth? I think we understand. You're just drawing false comparisons then. Oh, that's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm not saying arbitrary in that point of view. Well, you kind of are. You're saying everything is kind of arbitrary and it's kind of just subjective. It's not existing in the way that I think it exists. It's existing in the way you exist. It's existing the way I think it exists. And they think it exists objectively somehow because they want to say it exists this way, and they want to have everyone believe it exists this way. They want people to believe their way, even though, and they're trying to create some objective reality, even though the objective reality exists in and of itself. I guess it doesn't necessarily contradict it. They want it to be the way their reality, and they want it to be their subjective reality. They think they can shape-shift the Play-Doh so much and the clay so much to make sure. But if you think you can shape-shift it or the idea so much, you're obviously conceding to the point that there is some kind of objective reality that exists regardless, because there's something to exist that you're forming the clay out of. So think of it that way. You're forming the clay, but you're forming the clay. You're forming a statue. You're trying your best to form it, but the thing is, you're forming something. There's something there that's already formed, and you can form the clay, but the form is already there. It's already there. You can pretend you're forming the clay over the statue, but you can crack the clay and realize once it's hardened and the clay's gone that there's still the statue here. You can still put the extra layers on. You can still put the clay on, but you're going to realize you smash it with a hammer, and you're going to see exactly the foundation it came off of. Think of it as the statue of David or whatever, in brass or whatever, the foundation, the bedrock. You can layer it with a bunch of clay, and that's how. I mean, I'm using clay because you can say arbitrarily you can use whatever thing you want, but no, really, you're putting your false interpretations of reality on top, and that's how flimsy they are. They're going to be thin as glass, and once you realize that, you're going to crack it open. You're going to see, oh, the statue of David's still here. Yes, because I just put my crap on top of it. It's about getting rid of the crap, chiseling away at the crap, and seeing exactly what's underneath the crap to make sure you understand exactly what reality you're looking at. And that's exactly the point. The argument proves the point. The reality proves itself. The arguments and the implications, where it came from, and the implications of the argument, it came from a foundation. The foundation explains reality in and of itself. The argument, whatever lie or, like I mentioned, paradoxes, came from a foundation of contradictions, a buildup of a bunch of contradictions, or a bunch of false foundations and delusions. It came from something, but that doesn't mean it's everything. No, anyway, yes, but your interpretation doesn't mean anything because it's a false interpretation. Even if you think you're right, I can't say entirely I'm right. I can say I can only explain things so thoroughly enough. It's not that we can't know everything. It's just we can't explain everything as thoroughly as we can. We can see it. We can't see everything, but we can understand enough to a certain extent to come to conclusions. And the conclusions are the only thing that we need to understand exactly what's going on. So life explains itself. Reality explains itself. The universe and its function explains itself by its very existence. It doesn't need us. Bedrock and the foundation exist in and of itself. You're layering your stuff on your delusions is a layer of clay that you can easily crack, or a layer of glass that you can easily just smash through with a hammer. Again, the foundation's so much harder. It exists. It's in the ground. It's a piece of rock that it's so layered. It's the roots in the tree and the ground that you can't get out. And you want to put you throw some sand on it, and the sand you just swipe away. You crack the clay open. You crack the hardened clay, the hardened whatever it is, the thin layer of crap that's over on top of it. It's about cleaning it, cleaning all the grease off, cleaning all the rust off. Clean the rust off, and you'll realize. And the argument itself, like I mentioned, I keep going back to the argument. Yes, get rid of the fact, the implications, the argument itself. There's a contrary opinion. The contrary opinion came from somewhere. Yours, your delusion. Life explains itself, like I mentioned before. Life explains itself, and it's existing in a certain way, regardless of what you think or what don't think. Because it came from a foundation. It didn't come from thin air. But it did come from thin air, but it didn't come from nothing. You came from something as well. You came from your mother, right? Your parents, the mixture of semen and an egg. There's these foundations that you're basing these things off of. And you can say it's arbitrary, but your arbitrary distinctions in and of themselves are based on something that exists, not only logically, but the fact that the argument that you're having is proof itself. Not only that, but the fact that you can concede something and understand something, but ignore it during an argument, or understand that you're just completely denying something outright. You're just making your side of the story all the more weaker. So you're making it seem weaker, and you're not doing much for your story or your case. You're only making yourself seem more ignorant, and your arguments seem all the more weak. So what you need to do is let go of that. And the implications of an argument, there's a contrary opinion. The implications of that are proof enough, I think. Life explains itself. The argument came from somewhere, and it's based on a foundation that you can easily crack with the clay, like I mentioned, over the statue of David, or whatever you want to use as an example, or the roots and the ground, or the bedrock. They exist, and the implications. You can understand the direct feelings that you're feeling during an argument, arguing the things that you're denying yourself. You're denying the fact that something exists. Well, it exists because you're experiencing in an argument. You get heated over an argument, you realize you're arguing from a point of view, a contrary point of view. You can say it's subjective, but it's not. Especially when you're arguing and trying to prove the point about something that exists, your feelings, the existence of reality. You can say they don't mean anything, but they do mean something, because you're experiencing, and the implications that it means something in the end is proven in the argument itself. Not only because of the argument, but the implications, like I mentioned. You're going to be feeling something, emotions. You're going to understand the implications of reality. You obviously don't want to have your leg cut off. And to a certain extent, I guess I'm talking about the arguments and the denial of feelings and arbitrary distinctions and the objective reality. It exists. And the objective reality, I guess I'm mentioning this and I'm making this distinction, I'm making it so general, is because reality is about the deprivation, and the deprivation is about lessening the deprivation overall in the end as a whole. About the whole game, like I mentioned before, as opposed to the pieces in the game. So that's why it means something, and that's why the objective reality I can use as an example, as an entire general meaning when it comes to arguments and denying the truth, because the meaning is made by us, because this everything else, the thing that created us, means something to an extent because it exists and we're existing in it and interacting with it, and how it interacts with us means something. But it's us that makes the other interaction mean something. So it's us, the creation of us. This wouldn't mean anything. Everything else wouldn't mean anything unless we existed to have that interaction with the thing that causes a deprivation, because we can only exist as a deprivation in the environment we're living in, based on the thing that created us. And it's about the truth, and the general argument is about feelings, and that's what gives us the meaning, and that's the meaning described in and of the existence that we live in. So, yes. Sorry it's so dark. So yes, I think that's all I need to mention. So yes, so if I have anything else to say on this subject, let's check the notes one more time. Yes, the conflict of interest actually exists, and that's proof in and of itself. Proof in the pudding. Right? Right. Right. So I guess that's all I need to say. If I have anything else to say, like always, I'll mention in another video. So thank you. Until next time. Bye.